Hi everyone, my name is Palak Gupta and I am Assistant Professor in Department of Nutrition, Dietetics and Food Sciences, and I'm also an Extension Specialist for Hunger Solutions. Today's my presentation is going to talk about bridging learning and impact and student-centered teaching and extension in digitally mediated world. And I feel like with my experience in teaching Masters in Public Health courses, I teach program planning and evaluation in public health and advanced public health nutrition. And then my work in extension as extension specialist, I am able to translate what I teach in the class to what students experience. And that's why I wanted to talk about this presentation today with all of you and share what I have. So, just a little bit on why this matters. Over the last few years, we have seen rapid shift in how teaching and learning happen. With students have access to so much information with digital tools and platforms. It's so easy to have the access to information than ever before, and they can just summarize articles. They can generate ideas, even complete assignments with help of these tools. But at the same time, we have also moved into like a hybrid and digital learning environment. All of my courses are virtual or asynchronous. So with that movement, it has changed how students engage with the content and with each other. But what I'm noticing is that many of us, and I think many of us are also noticing that even though students are gaining access to more information, it doesn't always translate into deeper learning or real world application. So students often understand the concept at very surface theoretical level. For example, in my extension work, I work on food system and food insecurity a lot, and student can explain key ideas, what food insecurity is, what when I talk about nutrition disparities, what they are, what is food waste or sustainability. But when it comes to applying that theoretical knowledge into actual application, um, explaining these concepts to a parent or community event or helping them design a practical solution, they really struggle. So the challenge isn't just about the teaching of a content anymore, it's about helping student move forward from knowledge to actually doing it. And that brings us to this central issue that what happens in the classroom does not automatically translate into real world impact. So the question becomes, how do we intentionally design these learning experiences that bridges that gap, right? So just based on these challenges where students understand the content but struggle to apply it, we really need to rethink how we design these learning experiences for them. And that brings us to this guiding question that how do we design learning that actually extend beyond the classroom? Not just the assignment that stay on paper, but like experiences for them that connect them into real world, real problems. I just love when they make the connection that what they have learned, how they are applying that into a real world problem. Second, how do we ensure that learning stays meaningful in an AI driven world? So, when tools can generate answers so quickly, our roles shift towards helping students develop these deeper understanding, make them think critically, and the ability to apply knowledge in the context, something AI alone can't replace. And lastly, how do we prepare our students for real world work? Not just in terms of content, not in just terms of knowledge, but also in skills like communication, collaboration, problem solving, especially in community setting or public health settings, or when they are talking to real people. So for me, this question is really at center of my teaching, especially in the areas like program planning and evaluation, nutrition education, where the issues are complex and they are deeply connected to real lives. When you're working with community, you are working with real people. It's just not enough for students to know this information. They need to be able to use it effectively. And that's where integrating teaching and extension becomes really powerful, which I will talk about next in my slide. So, the way I've been thinking about addressing this gap is through integration of teaching with extension. Traditionally, let me just So traditionally, we think of teaching as what happens inside the classroom, where students build knowledge, they learn concepts, they develop critical thinking. Just a second. Okay. Um, okay, back to the slide. Yeah. Okay. So traditionally, we think about like teaching as what happens inside the classroom, and that's really important. But often that learning stays at theoretical level. On the other hand, extension focuses on applying that knowledge into real world settings. So it isn't about working with communities, addressing real needs. It's all about working with the communities and addressing their real needs and creating impacts, especially in the areas of food system and food insecurity. What is powerful is that we intentionally bring this two together, and that's how I do my teaching. Instead of viewing them separate, I design a model, or we can design a model where students move from classroom into applied learning experiences and then into the community impact. Importantly, it doesn't stop there. I also have a reflection phase where students make a sense of what they have experienced and then bring that learning back into the classroom to share with each other. So the learning becomes more cyclical. Students learn, they apply, and then they reflect, and then they refine their understanding. And then in this model, extension and community becomes a space where their learning actually becomes real. It's where students see their knowledge, what that actually means, where they can interact with people, they can navigate these challenges and adapt these ideas in real time. And and I feel that's where learning actually deepens. It's also where we start seeing that meaningful impact both for students and for communities they work with. So building on this framework and integrating teaching into extension, there's also an important shift in how we think about our students themselves. Um, so traditionally, students are positioned as recipients of our knowledge. They attend lectures, they complete assignments, they do discussions, they demonstrate what they have learned, but often within fairly contained academic world, right? When we move this forward towards in a model like if this is a model where students are not just learning the content but are participating in its application, then they become co-creators and practitioners contributing to real world, engaging with communities and helping real challenges. Many of our students are working professionals contributing to the real work already. So a lot of my students have like full-time jobs and then they have full-time families and then they are studying. So they are already working professionals and they have seen a little bit of real work, but then um, because of that, I think the shift also happens on how real learning happens. It's no longer a one-way process where students just learn and move on. It becomes more like a cycle. They learn a concept in classroom, they apply it in real world study setting like a community setting or extension, and then they reflect on those experiences. And through that reflection, they adapt their understanding. This cycle is where the deeper learning happens. And in my experience, this is also where students start to see themselves differently, just not as like student completing their coursework, but as individual who are contributing to solving real problem. And with that mindset shift, I think it's so critical, especially in the areas of program planning and public health and nutrition, where solutions require both knowledge and action. So my teaching concept, I would just talk, ground this in my own teaching concepts. Like I primarily teach courses in program planning and evaluation within public health, as well as public health nutrition courses. Most of my students are graduate students, although I work with some upper level undergraduate students as well. Many of them are graduate. Many of them are preparing for careers in public health practice or for their nutrition registered dietitian programs, or they're already working in community program or for non-profits, extension, healthcare settings, or they envision themselves to work in those settings. So the topics we cover are complex and very, very applied. Things like public health nutrition, we talk about chronic disease prevention, we talk about food system, we also talk about like air quality, water quality, food security, sustainability. So these are not just any broad theoretical issues. They are deeply connected to real world community and real challenges that exist, even like fire. Like these are the public health issues, right? So these are the challenges that exist, and they get to create programs for these challenges. So what this create is both opportunity for them and a challenge. So opportunity is that students are learning content that is highly relevant and highly meaningful, but the challenge is helping them apply that knowledge into real world setting. So, for an example, understanding of food security as a concept is one thing, but designing an intervention for, uh, for the people, it's really different. And then communicating it with community or adapting strategies for to a different community needs is entirely different. So that led me to think more intentionally about how I connect my teaching with extension work, so student can move beyond understanding these issues to actually engaging with them and thinking more practically with them. So this is really where that integration comes to life in my own work. I have been involved with like number of extension focused initiatives, such as my food waste initiative. It's called Nourish Smart, and then food recovery initiative and nutrition education initiative, such as Nourish Ed, and then teaching globally inspired recipes to community focused on food pantry things or food that are available in food pantries is my Nourish Health program. It all centers around food system, food waste, food access, food security. So these community-based programs are designed to address real challenges that exist in community, whether it's helping families address food waste or improving access to healthy foods or providing practical nutrition education. So what make these programs especially valuable for teaching is that they create opportunities for applied learning. So for example, we run community education programs like workshop, cooking demonstrations, food waste education sessions. We also do school and family-based outreach, including parent-child cook-along programs where families are actively participating and learning together. So uh, this work is always done in collaboration with extension professionals, schools, community partners, nonprofits. So students, when I put them in these situations, they are not working in isolation. They are part of a larger system of practice. And this creates a powerful learning environment for them because students are not just working on a hypothetical assignment. They are engaging in a real program that serve real community needs. And that change is how they think about their role. They begin to actually start thinking about themselves not just as learners, but contributors of meaningful work. So, in this model, I believe that it becomes more tangible on like what students are actually doing. In this approach, students are not just learning about programs or reviewing case studies, they're actively like contributing to ongoing extension work. So one of the ways they do it is by developing educational materials. Like they might create what they have learned about food waste or nutrition classes and create like lesson plans, handouts, simple guides that actually be used in community program. They also support program delivery. This could mean facilitating workshop, assisting at outreach event, interacting directly with families and youth. This often one of the most impactful experiences for students because it moved them out of the classroom setting into a real community spaces. Another important role is translating research into practical messages. This seems simple, but it's so hard. They realize that and that's what students realize, that knowing something is very different from from explaining it clearly, especially to a non-expert audiences. So when we talk about these heavy loaded words, this cannot work in communities. So when they translate actual research into simple messages, they have to rethink how to communicate, how to make information accessible, how to say it in the words that it's understood by the community. And then also finally, students are involved in designing and adapting intervention. So one of my big assignment for program planning and evaluation class is to actually work with the community to design an intervention for their public health needs. So they get to design that intervention. An example is like sometimes they can help with like designing cook along classes or come up with strategies to reduce food waste, or how to reduce air quality, or how to improve air quality. So these are like ideas are not just hypothetical, they're tested, adapted, and sometimes it's even implemented. So students are actually engaging in real work with real consequences and real impact. And that's a critical shift, because instead of practicing in a simulated environment, they're actually building skills in an authentic context. And that's where it strengthens both learning as well as their confidence. So just building on that idea of applied learning, I want to share an example from my program planning and evaluation course. In this course, students don't just learn how programs are designed, they actually develop a full program from scratch to finish. So the first step is that I asked them to identify a specific county or community of interest on which their whole semester they would be working on. And this is really important because it grounds their work in a real place with real people and real context. Then I asked them to identify a priority issue within that community. This could be something like food security or nutrition related, or a broader community health challenge. It could be air quality, fire, or anything they can think of. I asked them to use the actual available data and then actual evidence to justify why this issue matters. Next, I asked them to do a needs assessment to understand the problem more deeply. They look at these underlying causes, barriers, and existing resources. Once they have that foundation, they move to develop like an actual goal and objectives of the program. This is where I ask them to translate problem into clear, measurable outcomes, um, which is usually a challenge but very valuable part of the process. A key component in this program is building a logic model where students map out their whole program and their expectation of work. So they connect what are the resources available, what are the activities we would do to achieve different objectives and goals, what would be the outputs of these activities, and the short term, medium term, and long term outcome. And this helped them to systematically think about how the change would happen. Finally, they design the intervention itself, what program will actually look like and how it will be delivered and how it fits within that community context. What is powerful is that students are not just working on a hypothetical idea, they are designing program that realistically can be implementing. So learning actually becomes really applied, contextual, and meaningful, and it prepares them for the type of work they would actually be doing in public health practice. What I've found is this approach create outcomes at multiple levels, not just for students, but also for community we work for and also the program itself. So let's start with students. as we have talked about, one of the biggest gain is communication skills. Students learn how understanding a concept is very different from explaining it clearly to someone without a background in that area. That also really strengthens how they think and communicate. I also ask them to work this as part of a team, so teamwork becomes really important, and this is how any work in real life happens. It's always in collaboration and teamwork, so they get to learn those skills as well. They also develop real world problem solving skills. Unlike textbook examples, community settings, these community settings are often complex and then unpredictable. Students have to think critically how to adapt and make decisions in real time. Another important outcome, I believe, is huge confidence they get. Engaging directly with students, with communities, helps students feel more prepared and capable of working in a professional, real world setting. It bridges that gap between being a student and they actually thinks themselves as a practitioners. So that's a lot of benefits for students. For communities, the benefits are also meaningful. These programs provide access to practical, relevant information, whether about nutrition or about food waste or about air quality. Because the work is ongoing and community based, it also builds trust and engagement. They can see their future working professionals working for on a real issues. And I think most importantly, we begin to see behavior change, even for students as well as for families. Adopting these small changes of interventions like reducing food waste, improving food use practices, you start seeing those. At program level, student involvement involves us and me to expand the reach, which otherwise may or may not be possible. Students bring these fresh ideas and very new ideas in their own perspective sometimes, which add elements of innovation. Overall, I feel like this model creates a win-win across all level. Student gain skills, community benefits from engagement and resources, and programs just become more stronger and impactful. So, as we think about integrating teaching into real world application, we also have to consider the role of AI and these digital tools that are now become part of everyday learning environment. These are definitely the areas where AI can be helpful too. Like it can summarize content for student, it can organize information for them, it can also help with like a start or a draft of outreach materials. You have to be careful enough to connect back to resources and references, check and double check, but it helps provide an outline for students. It also helps them prepare them for engaging in community. Like it provides a good starting point to think through ideas. Another useful area is reflection. AI tool can provide these prompts that encourage students to think more deeply about their experiences and the way they are learning. So in many ways, AI can enhance the learning process. It can make students more efficient and sometimes even more prepared. But at the same time, there are important limitations we need to pay close attention to. Um, One concern is over reliance, as with any tool. If students depend too much on AI, learning can become more surface level for them than deep and critical. Uh, there's also risk of reduced critical thinking. If answers are this easily generated, students may not engage fully in the process of understanding. And more importantly, I feel, especially in its extension and community work, there's risk of losing that human connection. Working with communities requires empathy. It requires listening to them. It requires relationship building, things that technology cannot replace. So when I think about AI, is it should support learning but not replace the experience. Ultimately, that real world engagement, working with people, navigating these challenges and reflecting on those experiences, that creates deepest, most meaningful learning for them. So, a key question that often comes up is how do we actually help students move from theory to practice in a meaningful way? And in my courses, this doesn't happen automatically. It requires intentional structure, and that's what I call it as scaffolding. I do it stepwise. So the first step is pre-engagement training. Before students interact with community or start working on applied project, they need a very strong foundation. So that's why I ask them to do needs assessment, build their content knowledge, prepare on how they would communicate, how they would engage respectfully, and how to think about these real world context. And I provide them with sample letters for professionals, sample letters for community on like how to talk to. The next steps are guided assignment. Rather than asking them to directly jumping into complex tasks, we break the process down. For example, as I mentioned, the first is to identify community and priority area, and then develop goals, and then build a logic model, eventually design an intervention. So it's step by step, and it helps them connect theory to action. And then reflection is a critical key where students take time to think about what they have experienced, what worked, what didn't work, and what they learned. This really deepens understanding of them and the course. And because of this structured approach, we start to see meaningful skill development. Students become more effective at and I think this is big, they feel more effective at communicating with non-expert audiences. They develop cultural and community awareness as they engage with real population. They strengthen their problem solving skills by navigating challenges that don't have simple answer. They build their confidence and adaptability. They learn how to adjust their approach in real time if something is not working. And so the key takeaway here is that learning is intentionally structured in this way. It doesn't just happen theoretical. It translates into real skills that people prepare or kids or these students prepare for workforce. So, just to bring everything together, I want to leave you with a simple framework that has guided my approach in integrating teaching and extension. The first step is alignment, making sure what we teach in classroom connects directly into real world needs and extension goals. When learning is grounded in a meaningful issues, it immediately becomes more relevant for students. I'm lucky to teach courses which are working with real communities, and I'm lucky to have an extension role where I actually see that, and that's what I try to do it for my students too. The second step is engagement. This is where students move beyond being passive learners and become active contributors. By giving them meaningful roles in outreach and community work, we provide them opportunities which they can apply their knowledge into actual authentic settings. The third step is reflection, as I mentioned, and where it deepens the understanding and it allows students to process what they experienced, learn from challenges, and adapt their understanding moving forward. Um, Along this framework, there are a few takeaways I think I hope which resonates with you. First is learning must extend beyond the classroom if we want it to be meaningful and impactful, especially in this AI-mediated world. Second, students serve as a powerful bridge between academic knowledge and then community needs, where we intentionally design these opportunities. And lastly, we have to be very mindful that AI can support learning. It's absolutely there for you to help, but it cannot replace the value of real world, human centered experiences. And I want to just end with this meaningful thought that the most meaningful learning happens where students use their knowledge to actually serve real needs, right? And with that, I just want to end this presentation, and I hope um, you have learned some ways to use your theoretical classroom knowledge into practical setting. Extension is such a great resource where we can actually do that. Um, if you have any idea or if you want to connect more to brainstorm any ideas, I'm happy to connect and talk through. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.